tonight we slip through the fog and filth of old London, a place where the air tastes faintly of coal smoke, cabbage, and horse sweat, and the cobblestones gleam with things you'd rather not identify. It's the 18th century, and you're about to learn why someone might actually pay another person to walk their dog through all this grime. You can already hear the bark of a terrier echoing down an alleyway, mingling with the distant clatter of carriage wheels and the lazy toll of St. Paul's bells. You probably won't survive this stroll, not because of danger, but because your lungs would rebel after 5 minutes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of Covent Garden in 1765, the fog rolling low enough to brush your knees. The smell of roasted chestnuts fights a losing battle against the odor of dung and fish guts. The crowd moves like a sluggish tide. Merchants, hawkers, pickpockets, and, somewhat absurdly, a pair of tiny Italian greyhounds wrapped in silk. Their owner, powdered wig gleaming even in the gloom, lifts her skirts delicately to avoid the muck. The dogs prance as if they've never seen dirt before. You can tell immediately, these creatures are too precious to trot through London's mire without help. But the lady won't let them go unwalked. Her physician insists the animals need fresh air, a laughable concept in this smoky soup. So she hires someone, a man with boots sturdy enough to withstand the filth, to take them out in her stead. Thus begins the tale of the professional dog walker, long before anyone thought to call it that. By the mid-18th century, dogs had become fashion accessories. The Georgian elite adored their animals not for hunting or guarding, but for display. Pugs, spaniels, and lapdogs lounged in carriages, shared meals, and sometimes even slept on silk pillows beside their masters. You could say these creatures were the original influencers, fluffy embodiments of wealth. But what happens when such delicate beings need exercise? You can't send them outside with the stable boys. That would be scandalous. Enter you, the anonymous footsore walker. You trudge across the city's cobbles, holding braided leashes as your charges sniff at discarded oyster shells and the occasional rat tail. The dog's jeweled collars flash faintly in the lantern light. People glance your way, half amused, half envious. Because even though you're knee-deep in the street's worst offerings, you're touching wealth. The animals you handle are worth more than a carpenter's yearly wage. A mainstream historical fact sneaks in here. By the 1760s, London's pet population had exploded. Records from municipal authorities and satirical journals alike mention the city's unnatural affection for creatures of fur. Some dogs even had their portraits painted by the same artists who immortalized their owners. The upper classes sometimes powdered their dog's fur with scented starch to match their own wigs. Imagine the sneeze potential. Historians still argue whether this surge in pet devotion reflected genuine compassion or pure vanity. Some scholars claim it showed Britain's growing empathy during the Enlightenment. Others insist it was just another symptom of aristocratic boredom. Either way, the results were the same. Someone had to care for all these pampered creatures, and London's working poor were ready to oblige, for a price. You pause beside a grimy water pump. The fog beads on your eyelashes. Somewhere nearby, a watchman's rattle warns of thieves. You keep one hand on the leash, the other tucked close to your coat. The little pug you're walking snorts like a teapot. Its paws are black with mud, and you know you'll spend half the evening washing them in warm milk, because that's what the lady insists upon. Milk baths for paws, it's a thing now. You think about how strange your job is. Most Londoners scrape by hauling coal, cleaning chimneys, or gutting fish. You, on the other hand, escort dogs. You're not quite a servant, not quite your own master. Somewhere between. It's precarious work, but it keeps you in bread and beer. As you pass by an alehouse, someone shouts, "Oi, lend me your leash, I'll walk my wife next. The laughter spills into the street, warm and crude. You grin under your breath. That's joke number one of the night. Cheap humor, but fair play. You'll need the levity. The city's rhythm changes as the night deepens. Lanterns wink out one by one. You scout piles of ash and animal waste, guiding your charges through the maze of alleys. Somewhere a fiddle wails from an upper window. Somewhere else, a brawl erupts over dice. Yet you keep walking, because the little beasts need their constitutionals, and their owners' reputations depend on it. A healthy dog is a visible sign of domestic virtue, or at least that's what London gossip says this season. You recall hearing about Lord Pembroke, who reportedly kept a dedicated dog valet responsible for brushing, feeding, and walking 12 spaniels. The man's uniform matched the household livery, complete with silver buttons shaped like paws. A ridiculous sight, perhaps, but also an early blueprint for your trade. Servants were already halfway to being professional walkers, they just didn't have branding yet. As you turn toward the Thames, the wind sharpens. The river smells of rotten tar. You catch sight of a figure ahead, a rival walker, maybe, or one of those self-styled dog attendants who hang about the gardens offering to exercise gentlemen's creatures for a penny. Competition's fierce. Everyone's realized there's money in other people's pets. You stop near the embankment and watch the lights tremble on the water. The dogs yawn, their tiny bodies shivering. You pull your coat tighter and wonder how long this odd occupation will last. Perhaps forever, you think. After all, as long as there are rich people and dirty streets, there'll be someone willing to walk between them. You start back through the fog, feeling the first drizzle of rain. Behind you, the city hums, endless, alive, absurd. The dogs tug gently at the leash, eager for home. And as you lead them, you realize that this peculiar partnership, between filth and luxury, labor and leisure, will shape the story of London's dogs for decades to come. The fog thickens again, swallowing the lamplight until the world shrinks to the space of your breath and the soft padding of paws. You think, not for the last time, that this job is both demeaning and oddly noble. Someone must keep the creatures moving. Someone must brave the streets so others can boast clean shoes. And tonight, that someone is you. The next morning, you wake to a dull grey light filtering through your garret window, the smell of damp straw and coal smoke clinging to your clothes. London never really sleeps, it just changes shifts. The early market wagons creak past below, and you hear the first dogs barking, eager to get their turn at fresh, or relatively fresh, air. You pull on your boots, still caked with yesterday's mud, and head out. By the time you reach Cheapside, the city streets are already alive with movement. Hooves clatter, vendors shout, and somewhere a milkmaid sings off-key. The cobbles are slick from a night of drizzle, reflecting a faint, greasy sheen. Every inch of ground seems to carry a story, hoof prints overlapping with human tracks and, unmistakably, the small, paw-shaped smudges left by the city's growing population of pets. You notice them everywhere now, like tiny signatures stamped into the muck. The streets are not kind to feet, human or canine. London is still decades away from proper drainage or regular street cleaning. Rotting vegetable peels, fish guts, ashes from home hearths, and human waste all compete for space with straw from stables and broken glass from tavern brawls. If you walk here, you walk through a city's bowels. For a creature as dainty as a lapdog, the risk of sickness or injury lurks in every puddle. That's where your peculiar usefulness begins. Your employers, the fine ladies and powdered gents of Mayfair and Bloomsbury, want their dogs exercised but not contaminated. They want the benefits of a daily stroll, glossier fur, better temper, less yapping at supper, without dirtying their own shoes or delicate sensibilities. So they outsource it to you, the hardy, mud-proof intermediary. As you lead a pair of small spaniels down Ludgate Hill, the smells hit you like a parade. Tallow smoke from candle makers, sour beer from the nearby brewhouse, and the ever-present whiff of sewage wafting up from the Fleet Ditch. You don't even notice anymore, but the dogs sneeze, offended. You chuckle softly, second joke of the night, telling them they'll survive the experience. Probably. It's easy to forget that this is the same city where writers like Samuel Johnson wander between bookshops, where coffee houses buzz with debate, and where new inventions promise to make life cleaner, brighter, better. Yet step outside those bright windows, and the filth still reigns. You can almost hear London whisper, refinement begins indoors. A mainstream historical fact here. Despite early sanitation efforts, London's streets remained largely unpaved and unwashed through much of the 18th century. The city employed scavengers to collect refuse, but these workers, often elderly or poor, rarely kept up with demand. By 1760, the population had swelled beyond 700,000, and the infrastructure groaned under the weight. That's a lot of people, a lot of horses, and a staggering amount of waste. You pause near St. Dunstan's Church, where an organist's faint notes drift into the street. A small boy in patched trousers follows you, fascinated by the sight of your elegant charges. "Mister, them dogs eat better'n me," he says. You toss him a halfpenny, partly for his honesty, partly because he's not wrong. The dog's diet includes boiled chicken and soft bread soaked in cream. Yours, more often, is crust and ale. The city's sharp divide between rich and poor shows itself in every sniff of the air. Yet dogs bridge that divide oddly well. While their owners flaunt luxury, the animals themselves remain equal opportunity sniffers. They don't care whose refuse lies in the gutter, they'll investigate all the same. You tug their leashes gently away from a suspicious heap that might once have been cabbage, or might not. You can't help but laugh at the absurdity. London's elite build entire social reputations on keeping their hands and hems clean, yet their pets insist on dragging a little chaos home with every outing. That's part of the reason your work exists. You are the filter, the barrier between their pristine parlor carpets and the real world's mess. Historians still argue whether this arrangement reflected practicality or hypocrisy. Some say it was simply efficient. Why risk illness or scandal when you could pay someone to wade through the muck? Others suggest it revealed deeper social anxieties, the rich distancing themselves from dirt, which had become a moral marker as much as a physical one. Cleanliness, after all, was next to godliness, and filth belonged to the lower classes. As you turn toward Fleet Street, the noise builds again. Newspaper boys shout headlines about naval victories, carriages jostle for room, and you have to keep a firm grip on the leashes. The dogs bark furiously at a passing goose, nearly tangling your legs. You mutter something about needing hazard pay, third joke of the night, and carry on. It's a strange time to be alive. The Industrial Revolution hasn't yet reshaped the skyline, but its whispers are there. You've heard talk of paved roads, new drainage schemes, even proposals for regulated dog licenses. Some call them visionary, others, nonsense. For now, though, London remains gloriously chaotic. City butchers often tossed scraps into the street, attracting stray dogs that roamed in loose packs. Some of these strays became semi-famous neighborhood mascots, fed by locals. In certain markets, it was believed a resident mongrel brought good luck, or at least discouraged rats. You sometimes pass them on your rounds, their eyes bright, their tails wagging despite the hunger. They are your silent companions, though your employer would faint at the thought of her jeweled pugs fraternizing with such riffraff. You walk along the Thames embankment again, now visible in the pale daylight. Barges slide past, loaded with coal and bricks. The water glints dully, thick as stew. You remember hearing a surgeon once claim that London's air could be bottled as poison. He wasn't wrong. Still, you breathe deeply, because this is your world. The fog, the noise, the stink, and you've made peace with it. As you reach your client's townhouse, a footman opens the door. His powdered hair barely moves as he looks down at you. "You may wipe their paws in the vestibule," he says, in a tone suggesting you're lucky to be granted such a privilege. You comply, using a soft linen cloth set aside for that purpose. The spaniels lick your fingers anyway, their small gesture of gratitude cutting through the social divide like a knife through buttered toast. You step back into the street, job done, pockets a little heavier. Another set of dogs awaits, another route, another morning's march through history's dirtiest sidewalks. You glance once more at the paw prints fading into the grime and think how odd it is that something so filthy could give rise to a profession so strangely dignified. And as you stride away, boots squelching, you realize that those paw prints, messy, temporary, overlooked, are the truest records of this city's peculiar rhythm. They tell the story of companionship in a world that often forgets kindness, of little creatures needing care, and of people like you who found a way to earn bread in the service of small joys. The bells of St. Paul's begin to toll again, muffled by fog. You pull your coat tighter and smile faintly. Somewhere out there, a lady is sipping chocolate and congratulating herself on keeping her slippers spotless. And somewhere else, you're already planning your next walk through the living heartbeat of 18th century London. You don't remember the exact morning it happened, but at some point in the 1760s, Londoners began whispering about a certain fellow in St. James's who made a living walking dogs, only dogs, and nothing else. Not a servant, not a stable boy moonlighting, but a man who called himself, quite proudly, a keeper of canine company. You smile at the audacity. In a world where people die breaking coal or cleaning chimneys, he's figured out how to charge the wealthy for something they could technically do themselves. It's genius, really, equal parts necessity and theatre. You first spot him one misty afternoon near Hyde Park, a stout fellow in a brown frock coat, holding 3 leashes like ribbons in a maypole dance. He moves with practiced rhythm, tugging gently here, whistling there, dodging carriages without breaking stride. The dogs, 2 spaniels and a spoiled little pug, prance alongside him as though in a parade. People stare, half in disbelief, half in envy. Walking dogs for money? In this economy? But he looks perfectly at ease, even cheerful, as if he's discovered the city's best-kept secret. Dogs don't argue about wages. Soon enough, the idea spreads like the scent of roasted chestnuts. A few enterprising servants begin offering their services beyond the households they serve. A footman who once strolled his mistress's greyhound through Green Park now collects a few more clients and calls himself an independent walker. A laundress's son, quick on his feet and quicker with charm, offers to escort ladies' companions for exercise around the square. You can almost hear London adjusting to this new rhythm, the soft pad of paws joining the steady clop of hooves and the mutter of traders. You follow this early walker for a while, curious. He doesn't seem hurried. Instead, he maintains a steady pace, weaving between carts and beggars as though born to it. He greets other walkers with nods, trades gossip about clients, and occasionally pauses to let the dogs sniff at something intriguing. When one spaniel refuses to move, he kneels, murmurs a few soothing words, and slips a biscuit from his pocket. You realize this isn't mere walking, it's performance, caretaking, even diplomacy. There's a practical reason this profession finds fertile ground. London's upper classes are busier than ever, juggling morning calls, card games, and endless gossip. They treat their pets like children but lack the time, or the street grit, to manage them. A walker fills that gap, offering not just convenience but discretion. Because, let's face it, half of Mayfair's secrets are whispered while the owner's dogs are being exercised. A mainstream historical fact here. By mid-century, Professional dog keeping and breeding were already recognized trades in parts of London. Advertisements for experienced dog tenders appeared in newspapers like the Public Advertiser and the London Chronicle. These workers cared for dogs, trained them, or accompanied them on daily walks, though the term dog walker wouldn't appear formally until much later. Still, the spirit was the same, someone paid to manage a creature that symbolized leisure. Your fellow walker turns toward Hyde Park Corner, and you tag along, boots squelching in the soft mud. The park is a sea of contrasts: noblemen on horseback, washerwomen crossing with baskets, and somewhere in the middle, a few bewildered dogs wearing velvet ribbons. He tips his hat to a lady passing in her carriage, and she pretends not to recognize him. But later, you'll overhear her bragging at a tea table about "my dear Mr. Barclay, who exercises my darling Flora each morning." That's the thing about reputation. It starts in whispers and ends in fashion. Some early walkers advertised themselves as dog runners, offering to take energetic hounds for proper gallops along the park's outer paths. Rumor has it one fellow trained by running beside stagecoaches to build stamina. Picture that, jogging alongside thundering wheels while clutching a leash and trying not to die for 3 shillings a week. Fitness influencers would be proud. Historians still argue whether these first paid walkers were innovators or just desperate servants seeking side income. Some point to the entrepreneurial spirit that foreshadowed modern gig work. Others dismiss it as glorified servitude dressed up in politeness. Perhaps it's both. In this city, ambition and survival wear the same shoes. As evening falls, you meet your own potential clients. 2 ladies emerging from a milliner's shop, each with a spaniel perched like a feathered bonnet in her arms. Such a dreadful business, one sighs. Poor Flora can't possibly step out in this weather. You seize the moment, offering your services with a practiced bow. Their eyes light up at the idea. How novel, how civilized. You'll walk their precious companions while they remain spotless. You can almost hear your wallet sigh with relief. Soon, you're part of this small but growing guild of London's oddest professionals. The dogs, you discover, have personalities as varied as their owners. The sullen pug who refuses to cross puddles. The manic terrier convinced he's on military patrol. The melancholy spaniel who stares mournfully into every window as if searching for lost love. You talk to them under your breath, joking that they're your best listeners. They don't argue, after all. One day, you cross paths again with the man who started it all, Mr. Barclay himself. He's older now, the corners of his coat frayed, but his reputation precedes him. Mind the pug's temper, he warns with a grin. She bites like a banker. You laugh, and for a brief moment, you both share the absurd pride of men who make their living walking between mud and money. As the days roll on, your routine settles into a rhythm. Morning fog, afternoon drizzle, evening exhaustion. Yet, there's a strange satisfaction in it. Each leash feels like a thread connecting you to the pulse of the city. You learn the shortcuts, the safe corners, the best puddles to avoid. You start recognizing other walkers by their stride or whistle. Without realizing it, you've joined a quiet fraternity of people who understand that beneath all the polish and perfume, London's heart still beats in the streets. By the time you deliver your last dog home that night, your boots are soaked, your fingers numb, but you're grinning. You've earned a few coins, a few smiles, and, oddly enough, a sliver of dignity. You've turned mud into livelihood, vanity into opportunity. And somewhere behind a gilded window, a noble woman praises your dependability, unaware that your entire career began because someone else refused to touch the ground. You stretch your sore legs, glance back at the city's labyrinth of lamplight and shadow, and think that maybe, just maybe, London needed this job more than it realized. Not for the dogs, but for the humans who found purpose walking them. You start to notice the pattern soon enough. Where there's wealth, there's hierarchy, and where there's hierarchy, there's always someone to hold the leash. Literally. By now, 18th century London's elite have turned dog walking into a new badge of social theatre, a moving stage where servants, pets, and owners perform their roles with polished choreography. You're somewhere near the middle of this peculiar dance, earning your bread by keeping rich shoes clean and dogs content. The morning fog is thick again, turning every street lamp into a hazy halo. You can hear the rattle of wheels over cobbles, the clip-clop of horses, and the faint jingling of a little bell tied to a Pomeranian's ribboned collar. It's your employer's latest acquisition, a dog so tiny you could fit it inside a teapot, though heaven help you if she heard you say that. Lady Ashcombe insists the creature has royal lineage and must be walked precisely 25 minutes every morning, not a second more or less. You carry a small pocket watch to prove your punctuality, because in her world, time and class are everything. Today, you aren't walking just dogs. You're walking reputation. Every leash is a thread connecting a noble household to the city's gossip network. People notice. Servants gossip. Carriage windows twitch with curiosity as you pass. The choice of dog breed alone tells half a story. A pug for those with continental flair, a spaniel for sentimental souls, a greyhound for the fashionable set who like their pets lean and fast. You've heard that the Duchess of Portland pays her manservant a bonus if her dogs behave gracefully in public. A calm dog, she says, reflects a calm household. You snort quietly at that, second joke of the night, because if only she could hear what her footmen say about her temper when she's late for supper. Here's a mainstream historical fact. By the late 1700s, domestic service was Britain's largest single form of employment. Almost every upper and middle class home had at least one servant. Grand houses had dozens. Their duties ranged from the noble to the absurd. Footmen polished silver buttons for hours, valets warmed slippers by the fire, and yes, some were assigned to manage dogs. They were called dog boys, kennel maids, or simply keepers. But as pet culture grew, those roles began to splinter, creating a gray area between household service and independent work. That's where you thrive, just outside the manor walls, free enough to set your own routes but still tethered to gentry coin. You're an odd hybrid, half tradesman, half servant, and fully indispensable. The elite like to pretend that letting you walk their dogs isn't about status, but it absolutely is. It shows they can afford someone else's time, someone else's shoes in the mud. You make your way toward St. James's Park, where the morning parade of wealth is already underway. Ladies in silk stroll arm in arm, gentlemen display their newest waistcoats, and everywhere, small dogs trot proudly beside them like furry exclamation points. You can spot which animals belong to hired walkers, leashes made of sturdy leather rather than decorative ribbons, handlers with mud on their boots and resignation in their eyes. A nod here, a glance there, you all know each other by scent and step. Historians still argue whether this entire spectacle was genuine affection for animals or just another form of conspicuous consumption. Some say it signaled a new moral sensitivity, that loving pets reflected the era's growing emphasis on feeling and sympathy. Others, more cynical, call it vanity wrapped in fur. You suspect the truth lies somewhere between the two. Humans always find ways to turn sincerity into fashion. One afternoon, you pass a cluster of noble women gathered near the Serpentine, their parasols like bright mushrooms in the mist. They are gossiping about whose dog bit whom at the last garden party. You catch the name of a rival walker accused of overexerting a pug. You stifle a laugh, imagine explaining that in court. But among the rich, pet mishaps are social tragedies. A single limp paw can end a season's worth of invitations. You tie the leashes to a bench and glance at your own reflection in the water, mud splattered, coat frayed, hair escaping from under your hat. A servant, yes, but not a broken one. You've learned that dignity doesn't always come from titles. Sometimes it comes from mastering chaos with quiet grace. Slides into memory. In some households, dog handlers were required to wear matching livery, embroidered coats in the family colors, sometimes even miniature medals for faithful service to the canine household. One eccentric owl supposedly commissioned portraits of his kennel staff posing with their hounds, claiming, "They are the true keepers of my estate's happiness." You'd like to meet that man. He'd understand your job better than most. Back on the path, a gust of wind sends leaves swirling. The dogs sniff excitedly, and you think about how strange it is that leashes, these tiny strips of leather, have become instruments of class. You've held more wealth in your hand through these threads than most men hold in a lifetime. Each tug reminds you where you stand in the social ladder, close enough to the top to glimpse it, but never invited in. As you near Piccadilly, a coach splashes through a puddle, dousing your boots. You curse under your breath, earning a scandalized glare from an elderly matron. "Apologies, madam," you say smoothly, "I only barked." She huffs away, scandalized, and you grin. Third joke of the night, small victories matter. By now, you've memorized the unspoken etiquette. Never address your employer unless spoken to, never hand the leash directly to her hand, the butler will take it, and never, under any circumstances, allow the dog to soil the marble entryway. 4 breaches of conduct, fines await, but so do small favors. An extra coin, a warm loaf from the kitchen, a kind word passed through a maid. It's a tightrope act, balancing service and self-respect. When evening falls, you pass through Mayfair again. Candlelight spills from drawing room windows. Inside, laughter rises, muffled by thick curtains. Somewhere in those glittering rooms, your employers brag about their industrious walkers, as though you're part of the furniture. But outside, under the dim lamps, you and your fellow walkers share nods of quiet recognition. You're building something, an invisible network of labor that keeps the city's pets healthy and its aristocrats spotless. You stop for a moment on a bridge, the city glimmering around you. The wind carries the scent of coal, wet leather, and roasted chestnuts. Below, the Thames moves like molten metal. You think of all the leashes winding through London like veins, each one connecting lives that might never otherwise touch. Dogs don't care about rank, you muse. They just want to walk. And maybe, in this strange way, they are dragging everyone, lords, ladies, and labours, toward a small moment of shared humanity. By now, you've learned that London has a way of swallowing ambition and spitting out new professions, and the dog walkers, your peculiar tribe, are multiplying like springtime fleas. You see them everywhere now, at dawn, trudging through the fog, at dusk, squinting through the lamplight, and sometimes in the dead of night, when the city is quieter, though never truly still. Most began as servants, the invisible gears of aristocratic households, but the clever ones are reinventing themselves. You meet one such soul outside Hyde Park one brisk morning, a tall, sharp-eyed former footman named Samuel Briggs. His coat is patched but clean, and his boots shine with pride. "No master now," he says, thumping his chest with a grin. "Just clients." He says the word clients like a nobleman savoring wine. He's one of the first to transform dog walking from servitude into self-employment, the 18th century equivalent of a startup founder. Started with 2 spaniels, he tells you, adjusting his cap. "Now I walk 6, sometimes 8. I charge by the hour, or by the temperament, if they bite." You laugh, the both of you knowing that certain pugs demand combat pay. His routes are legendary, a circuit through Hyde Park and Green Park, timed perfectly so that the wealthy might see him at just the right moment, their own dogs tugging impatiently at velvet cushions back home. It's a performance, really. Samuel knows visibility is advertisement. You begin to copy him, walking near fashionable places, making sure you're seen. It's marketing before the word existed. A mainstream historical fact slides neatly into place. Hyde Park and St. James's were the epicenters of public display in Georgian London. The promenade was a social ritual, where one was meant to be seen more than to walk. Gentlemen paraded horses, ladies displayed gowns, and now, perhaps inevitably, dogs had joined the spectacle. A well-behaved animal reflected household virtue. A misbehaving one could ruin it. You and Samuel become friendly rivals, comparing notes over mugs of weak ale. He talks about routes like merchants discuss trade winds. Morning crowds good near Piccadilly, he says. Lots of bored ladies with lapdogs. Avoid Covent Garden afternoon, too many carts, too much stink. You nod solemnly, as though he's describing military strategy. Soon enough, the profession develops its own strange code of honor. You learn to respect another walker's territory. You nod courteously when paths cross but never poach a client. And when one of your dogs misbehaves, say, relieves itself in front of an apothecary's shop, you take the blame gracefully, even bowing if the owner of the shop scowls. Pride is for masters, professionalism is for walkers. One fog-drenched afternoon, you watch a new face join the ranks, a former laundress named Molly Cutts, the first woman you've seen take up the work. She's small but fierce, walking 3 dogs at once through St. James's Square as though commanding a tiny army. She's got a knack for reading canine moods, soothing the anxious ones with soft humming and reining in the rowdy with a sharp whistle. Within a month, her reputation spreads. Ladies adore her, grooms curse her for stealing their side income. You can't help but cheer her on. Molly claims she perfumes her coat with lavender oil because dogs fancy a floral breeze. You're skeptical until you try it yourself and notice your client's poodles wag more enthusiastically. Either the dogs like the scent, or they think you're a walking flower bed. In either case, business improves. Historians still argue whether early female walkers like Molly were accepted or merely tolerated. Some accounts suggest they gained favor with female clients who preferred a woman's discretion. Others insist they faced mockery, especially from male servants who saw the trade as theirs alone. Either way, Molly thrives, proving yet again that London rewards cunning over conformity. You begin to realize that dog walking has evolved beyond simple errands. It's become a network. Walkers share routes, warn each other about unfriendly constables, and even collaborate to manage large kennels. There's a whispered understanding that the right clients can change a life. A recommendation from a duchess might earn steady work for months. A single scandal, a lost dog, a scratched paw, can ruin you overnight. You spend more and more time near Hyde Park, where the wealthy gather for their daily display. There's talk of turning certain areas into dog runs, little fenced patches of grass for pets to romp while owners socialize. You laugh at the absurdity. What next? A park just for dogs? But deep down, you sense the idea isn't far-fetched. One afternoon, you walk 3 dogs belonging to different households, careful to keep their leashes from tangling. Passers-by stare, amused by the spectacle of one man wrangled by fur and ribbon. A carriage rolls by, and a powdered gentleman inside chuckles. There goes London's newest trade, he says. The pedestrian menagerie. You bow slightly, tipping your hat. You'll take ridicule if it's paid ridicule. As the sun dips low, you pause at a park bench, letting your charges rest. The city hums softly around you. Children laughing, traders haggling, a distant flute drifting through the fog. You realize, with a quiet satisfaction, that you've become part of something bigger than mere survival. You're a witness to London's transformation, step by muddy step. You think of how it began, with nobles too refined for filth, and how it's now turning into a modest enterprise for the poor but clever. Somewhere between servitude and freedom lies this strange profession, balanced on a leash. You grin, because maybe that's London's secret. The city invents itself daily from the space between necessity and vanity. The dogs stir, ready to move again. You rise, joints creaking, and lead them onward through the fading light. The fog rolls in, carrying the smell of rain and coal. Behind you, your footprints mingle with paw prints, soon to be washed away. But the pattern will return tomorrow, and the day after, as long as London remains muddy and dogs remain pampered. You hum softly, a tune you picked up from a street fiddler, and your dogs trot beside you, tails wagging. You can almost imagine the rhythm echoing through centuries, the sound of small paws and steady boots shaping a city's peculiar heartbeat. By now you can find your way across the city by smell alone, a dubious achievement, but impressive all the same. London's air carries 1,000 notes: coal smoke that scratches your throat, tanneries curing leather by the river, fresh bread from street ovens, and underneath it all the steady pulse of refuse. You know which corners bloom with rot after a warm rain and which alleys stay mercifully dry. Every walker learns this map by nose. It's the unwritten geography of your trade. You step out before sunrise with 4 dogs in tow, the street slick with dew and something less poetic. The terrier strains toward a gutter alive with movement. You tug him back, whispering, "Leave it be, soldier. It's already dead." He barks anyway, proud of his bravery. The spaniel beside him sneezes. You laugh softly, first joke of the night, because in this city even sneezes sound judgmental. A scavenger pushes a wooden cart ahead of you, calling for ashes, bones, and rags. He's part of the city's unofficial cleanup crew, trading trash for pennies. You nod as you pass, in a way you're colleagues, both earning coins from what others won't touch. The difference is that your rubbish barks. By mid-century, London's sanitary reformers were sounding alarms. A mainstream historical fact: reports from the Board of Health in the 1750s complained that animal ordure, offal, and dead dogs clogged the streets and poisoned the air. The city's scavengers were overworked, and household waste mingled freely with the droppings of thousands of horses and pets. Disease, it was feared, rose from every puddle. Yet the streets never truly cleared, they just shifted their filth from one season to another. That meant dog walkers like you became accidental public servants. Clients expected you not only to exercise their animals but also to ensure the sidewalks near their homes stayed presentable. You carry a small scoop carved from wood and a bucket of sand for covering the worst evidence. It's humble work, but rumor has it that night soil collectors buy animal waste by weight for use in fertilizer and, less appealingly, in the tanning trade. Waste, it seems, is wealth when you know where to sell it. You start saving the scraps in a sealed barrel behind your lodgings, and soon enough, a local gardener pays you a tidy sum each month. Who knew dog walking came with dividends? Historians still argue whether this side business counts as early urban recycling or mere opportunism. Some praise the walkers as pioneers of sanitation. Others insist they simply Monetized misery. You decide not to worry about labels. Bread's bread, however it's earned. As the morning brightens, you lead your pack through Smithfield Market. Butchers shout prices over the buzz of flies. Blood slicks the cobblestones. The dogs are wild with excitement, noses twitching at every drip and bone. You keep them close. Too many strays lurk here, and a fight could end your reputation faster than a scathing rumor in a coffee house. Mind your beasts, a vendor yells as you dodge a hanging carcass. They'll spoil the meat. You raise an eyebrow. If the smell hasn't spoiled it already, sir, nothing will. The vendor scowls, but a porter laughs, and you wink, second joke of the night. You guide the dogs out toward the cleaner air near Holborn, past bricklayers mixing mortar with buckets of river water the color of tea. The smallest pug begins to limp, his paws are raw from the grit. You stop, kneel, and wash them gently with a rag dipped in rainwater. Passers-by glance at you oddly, as if pitying a man who kneels to comfort an animal. But you see something else, the faint beginning of respect. Kindness, it turns out, is contagious even in a city addicted to cynicism. There's talk now of new sanitation schemes, cart routes for regular waste collection, rules against dumping near the Thames. Coffee house wits debate them endlessly. Some hail these as the dawn of cleanliness, others grumble that London thrives on her own perfume. You sip thin ale and listen, thinking that whatever reforms come, there will always be dogs, and as long as there are dogs, there will be walkers to clean up after them. Certain apothecaries claim dog dung, dried and powdered, cures leather to perfect softness. They call it pure. Tanneries pay well for it, and a few walkers, yourself included, occasionally trade small bundles. The irony isn't lost on you. The same waste that disgusts polite society ends up polishing the shoes that step daintily over it. By noon the sun burns through the haze, turning the city into a shimmering mirage of brick and soot. You rest near the river, watching barges drift past carrying coal, timber, and sometimes entire loads of refuse bound for dumping grounds downstream. The dogs doze beside you, bellies rising and falling in rhythm. For a moment, the world smells almost pleasant, tide and tar, faintly sweet with baking bread from the nearby wharf. A street preacher passes, shouting that London's filth is divine punishment for pride. You smile to yourself, third joke of the night, because if that were true, the city would have drowned in muck centuries ago. Still, you toss him a coin. Everyone's got a job to do. As evening settles, fog rolls back in, wrapping the city in its sour embrace. You make your rounds one last time, collecting a stray hound for a brewer who pays in ale, then dropping off Lady Ashcombe's perfumed Pomeranian with its paws scrubbed and its bow straight. The butler barely nods as he hands you your shilling, but you catch a glimpse of the dog wagging its tail through the closing door. That's thanks enough. You walk home under the gasless lamps, thinking about how every trade in this city somehow circles back to its date, how even gentility depends on someone else's willingness to wade through grime. You've made peace with it. The stink may cling to your coat, but so does a strange kind of pride. You, the walker, are the hinge between worlds, mud and marble, sweat and silk, paw and polished boot. Without you, London would choke on its own splendor. The dog's distant barks fade behind you, replaced by the lull of the river. Tomorrow the streets will fill again, the smells will shift, and you'll trace the same route, bucket in hand, humming a tune that no one hears but the stray cats and the stars. You wake to church bells and distant barking, the city's odd duet of salvation and chaos. A new day, another leash in hand. The fog curls like a ghost around your boots as you step outside, the cobbles slick and glinting. The dogs are restless, tiny dynamos of fur and entitlement, and you can already hear the first sermon of the day spilling from a nearby chapel. The preacher is thundering about the moral decay of the age, which, to your mild amusement, seems to include small dogs in ribbons. It's a funny time, you realize, when a person's soul is measured by how they treat their animals. You've heard it in whispers and sermons alike. Cruelty to beasts is a sign of rot, kindness a token of divine favor. In Georgian London, the moral microscope has toned downward, from the heavens to the kennels. Writers publish pamphlets proclaiming that to kick a dog is to wound the very heart of civilization. It's the Enlightenment with a wagging tail. You pause by a bakery and tie your charges to a lamppost. The smell of warm bread pulls you inside. The baker, a stout man with flour in his hair, nods toward the door. Your lot won't bite, will they? You grin. Only if underfed, over-insulted, or compared to members of parliament. He laughs, handing you a crust. That's joke number one for the evening, an easy crowd. When you step back into the street, a young boy stands beside the dogs, staring in awe. "Do you own all of them?" he asks. You shake your head. "No, lad. I just borrow their tempers for the afternoon." You mean it. Dog walking has made you part caretaker, part confessor, part moral proxy. Among your wealthier clients, charity begins with leash etiquette. Lady Ashcombe insists her poodle must not only look genteel but behave as if aware of God's eye. She lectures you on kindness and insists you carry sugared biscuits for the dog's emotional well-being. You suspect the poodle would rather eat a pigeon, but you comply. When she tips you an extra coin for good Christian patience, you resist pointing out that she's just outsourced her virtue to you. A mainstream historical fact, the 18th century saw a surge in animal welfare thinking, culminating in publications like Humphrey Primate's dissertation on the duty of mercy and sin of cruelty to brute animals, 1776. He argued that compassion toward animals reflected one's humanity, a radical notion in an era that still whipped horses and experimented on strays. And yet, paradoxically, London was also the city of bull-baiting pits and dancing bears. Hypocrisy had excellent posture back then. Your fellow walkers gossip about these contradictions at the coffee house. One insists the clergy secretly blesses pets in exchange for donations. Another swears he saw a nobleman's dog wearing a silver cross blessed by the Bishop of Winchester. London, someone quips, has more holy dogs than honest priests. Joke number 2. The laughter is soft but genuine. You sip your coffee, thinking how faith and fashion intertwine. For every sermon against cruelty, there's a satirical poem mocking pampered dogs. One pamphleteer calls them the idle heirs of better men's dinners. Still, the moral tide is turning. The same society that once thought nothing of beating a stray now discusses its feelings over breakfast. Walkers like you ride that shift like smugglers on the current, profiting from guilt, piety, and affection in equal measure. Sometimes, though, morality bites back. You recall the day you lost a client because you swatted her spaniel's nose after it tore up her silk drapes. She wept as though you'd struck a child. "He's sensitive," she cried. You wanted to answer, "So am I," when unpaid, but bit your tongue. Historians still argue whether this surge of sentiment was genuine compassion or simply a new form of social theater. You suspect it's both, feeling and fashion, indistinguishable in a powdered mirror. By late afternoon, you lead your dogs along the Serpentine, the water glinting like tarnished silver. Other walkers pass by, each performing an unspoken ritual of restraint and affection. You overhear a governess instructing her charge, "Mind how you hold the leash, dear," gently, as you would a promise. You smile at the metaphor. Perhaps dog walking teaches virtue better than half the sermons in London. A man selling penny prints waves you over. His latest shows a lady feeding her lapdog from a golden spoon while a beggar starves outside her gate. "Hypocrisy for tuppence," he says with a wink. You buy one, not for decoration, but as proof that even satire depends on dogs now. They've become moral mascots, reflections of who people wish they were when no one's watching. As twilight gathers, you cut through Covent Garden. Musicians play, hawkers shout. A street philosopher argues that dogs are the only honest citizens of London. Someone heckles, "Then let them pay taxes." The crowd laughs, joke number 3, and you wonder if, perhaps, they already do, in patience and loyalty. You head home through narrow lanes, the moral murmur of the city fading behind you. The dogs trot faithfully, their shadows stretching long in the lamplight. You think of how strange it is that virtue now has pause, that the measure of a man can be found in how softly he speaks to something that cannot answer. Maybe that's why you've stayed in this trade. Amid all the muck and mockery, walking dogs feels honest. They neither flatter nor lie. They simply walk beside you, breathing the same foul air, chasing the same fleeting pleasures. In a world forever preaching, that's a sermon you can trust. When you reach your door, the dogs sit patiently as you untangle the leashes. One licks your hand, and you can't help but smile. The city may judge, the preachers may scold, and the poets may mock. But tonight, morality feels warm and alive, curled up at your feet. You've begun to notice that London's best gossip travels faster than the Thames tide, and nowhere does it swell thicker than the coffee houses. Every afternoon after your final walk, you slip inside one, the Turk's Head near the Strand, or Buttons if you're feeling ambitious, and the air buzzes with conversation. Steam rises from cups, ink stains every other finger, and the talk jumps from politics to poetry to whose pug misbehaved in Hyde Park. You hang your damp coat by the fire, not to the proprietor, and take your usual seat by the window. A pair of fellow walkers sit across from you, arguing over rates. 2 shillings an hour's the going price for a purebred spaniel, says one, a wiry man named Davies. 3 if you must brush it after. His companion snorts. 3? You'll scare off the clients. These people think dogs should walk for free. You sip your coffee and hide your smile. Joke number 1 of the night practically writes itself. If virtue walks on 4 legs, gentlemen, perhaps they'll soon charge the dogs rent for the park. They groan, but they are grinning. The chatter around you folds into a warm roar, merchants discussing trade routes, playwrights mocking the latest fashion, and, tucked between them, the newly minted profession of dog walking staking its claim as respectable work. You pull a small ledger from your coat, the paper soft with use. Inside, you've copied notes from clients, feeding schedules, temperaments, even the peculiar detail that Lord Chatfield's bulldog responds only to Latin commands. You once tried it, shouting Veni, Canis. In the street, earning both obedience and bewildered stays. That's London for you, an empire of eccentricities. The coffee house has become your office, your meeting hall, and your newsstand. Word spreads quickly here, and not just about politics. Who owns what dog, who neglects it, who pampers it? Those stories circulate faster than plague rumors. Did you hear? Whispers a pamphleteer at the next table. Lady Pelham's Italian greyhound escaped yesterday. The walker found it at Covent Garden, dining from a fishmonger's bucket. Someone chuckles. And the fishmonger charged her a guinea ransom. A mainstream historical fact anchors this scene. Coffee houses in 18th century London truly were the city's information networks, places where news, business, and scandal intertwined. The penny universities, as they were called, welcomed everyone who could pay a coin for entry, creating a public sphere in which even lowly servants could overhear ministers and merchants. For dog walkers like you, it's a marketplace of both coin and reputation. Over time, informal contracts emerge. Walkers meet wealthy owners here, negotiate terms, and occasionally poach clients with a better rate or smoother manners. You've learned to carry yourself with quiet dignity, hat brushed, boots shined, tongue ready for a compliment or a jest. The deal often begins with a simple question: are you available to walk a creature of delicate nerves? Which is to say, the dog's master as much as the dog itself. Historians still argue whether these early agreements mark the birth of professional animal care or simply a polite extension of servitude. You suspect the truth lies, as usual, somewhere between the cup and the saucer. You scribble a note in your ledger: 2 new clients pending, avoid the poet with the mastiff, unpaid twice. Outside, a newsboy cries headlines about parliamentary reform, but inside, your little table hums with its own commerce. The line between gossip and business is thinner than a leash. Later, a tall man in a red waistcoat joins you. You recognize him, Edward Canning, once a stable hand, now managing half the noble dogs of Mayfair. He lowers his voice. There's talk of a club, he says. A gathering of professional walkers. We'll share clients, routes, perhaps even a price list. You raise an eyebrow. An association of leashmen. Why not? The farriers have theirs. The chimney sweeps too. Why should we trail behind? You can't help it. Joke number 2 slips out. Because we're always trailing behind, Edward. Occupational hazard. He laughs loud enough to turn heads. Still, the idea lingers. A guild of dog walkers. It sounds absurd, yet somehow noble. A lady enters the coffee house then, veiled but unmistakably well-born. Conversation drops an octave. She approaches your table with the air of someone used to obedience. You, she says softly, walk Lady Ashcombe's poodle, do you not? You nod, wary. Then you will kindly ensure it is not seen near Lord Pelham's greyhound. There are rumors. Ah. The dogs are innocent, but their owners are not. You bow. Of course, madam. I'll keep their paws socially distanced. Joke number 3, though she doesn't laugh. She leaves behind the scent of perfume and scandal in equal measure. When she's gone, Canning whistles low. Careful, my friend. One wrong word, and you'll be walking yourself to the debtor's prison. You shrug. Or to fame. Depends who's listening. The night deepens, candles flicker low. A poet reads verses about loyalty and decay. Someone toasts to honest beasts and dishonest masters, and everyone drinks. You notice how the dogs creep into every story, symbols of fidelity, vanity, even rebellion. In a city that barely trusts itself, dogs remain proof that something still can. As you step back into the damp chill, you realize how these smoky rooms bind the trade together. Here, reputations are born, ruined, and sometimes redeemed over a single pot of coffee. Tomorrow, when you pass Hyde Park, you'll see the effects ripple out. New clients, old rivals, and a few more secrets tucked behind polite smiles. You walk home through the drizzle, the street lamps faint halos in the mist. Somewhere ahead, a stray dog barks, its echo bouncing between the walls like laughter. You grin, thinking of the coffee house chatter still buzzing in your ears. London talks, you listen. And sometimes, if you're clever, you let the talk walk itself straight into profit. By now, you've mastered the art of listening, not just to gossip, but to growls, sighs, and the low rumble of a dog's thoughts. Every day, you lead your pack through the trembling dawn light, and somewhere between Hyde Park Corner and the Serpentine, you begin to wonder what, exactly, goes on in their heads. You're not alone in the question. London's thinkers are asking it too, though they prefer longer words and fewer fleas. Temperament, they call it. Disposition. The canine humors. You've heard the lectures at Gresham College, the same halls that once hosted debates on planetary motion and now host gentlemen arguing whether dogs feel jealousy or just hunger. You pass a bookseller displaying the latest pamphlet on the natural affections of beasts and the reflections of their masters. You skim a page and chuckle at the earnest claim that a melancholic dog must belong to a melancholy man. Joke number 1 writes itself. Then London must be owned by pessimists. Still, you can't help being intrigued. You've noticed that dogs mirror their owners with uncanny precision. Lord Pelham's greyhound moves with aristocratic boredom. Lady Ashcombe's poodle fusses like its mistress. The brewer's mastiff snores like a drunkard. The theory might not be wrong, just over-polished. A mainstream historical fact grounds this. In the mid-18th century, British natural philosophers did indeed link animal temperaments to human ones, extending the ancient idea of the 4 humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, to pets. Writers like John Arbuthnot speculated that even dogs possess these complexions, their behavior reflecting the balance or imbalance within. The result? Dog walkers like you suddenly find yourselves not merely caretakers but amateur diagnosticians. "Ah," says Lady Fenchurch, watching you study her pug, "you can tell what ails him by the eyes." You nod gravely, though the only ailment you see is overeating. Still, you play along. "Too much heat in the bile, madam. A few cooler walks and perhaps less beef fat." She rewards your insight with a silver coin. Science pays better when it flatters. Soon, the city teems with self-appointed experts. Walkers swap stories in coffee houses about dogs cured with baths, herbs, or fresh air. "A melancholy spaniel," says Davies. "Take him to Vauxhall Gardens." The music cheers the humours. Another claims that laughter, yes, human laughter, restores a dog's balance. You picture men standing in parlors, giggling over poodles like mad prophets and nearly choke on your coffee. That's joke number 2. Historians still argue whether this was pseudoscience or the first glimmer of animal psychology. You decide it's both, half nonsense, half genius, all London. One damp morning, you test the theory yourself. The brewer's mastiff, usually docile, has grown restless, barking at shadows. You decide his phlegmatic temperament needs stimulation. You take him across the river to the fields beyond Southwark, where the air smells of grass instead of smoke. There, he runs until the tension leaves his limbs. When he finally returns, tongue lolling, you swear you see gratitude in his eyes, or maybe relief that you didn't try bleeding him like a human patient. You return through the markets, feeling oddly enlightened. Perhaps there's truth in it. Dogs, like people, need variety, gentleness, and care. London's walkers, you realize, are the city's first psychologists, though no one would dare use that word yet. Later that week, you're summoned by a doctor from Bloomsbury, a physician curious about animal spirits. He wants to observe your work. Together, you walk a nervous whippet whose owner complains of fits of melancholy. The doctor takes notes as you soothe the dog with slow pacing and calm speech. "Remarkable," he murmurs. You adjust your gait to his distress. You shrug. "Easier than adjusting him to mine." He nods, perhaps learning more than he expected. That evening, you find your name scrawled in the margins of a newspaper letter, a certain walker known for calming anxious beasts. Fame, in miniature. It's not much, but in a city that forgets names faster than debts, it's something. The fascination with canine emotions spills into art and literature. Painters depict noble women with soulful-eyed dogs. Poets write odes comparing faithful hounds to loyal lovers. You begin to suspect that London's sentimental streak has gone feral. A satirist jokes that the next parliament will seat terriers instead of Tories, for they bark with more honesty. Joke number 3 lands well at the coffee house, even the Whigs laugh. You start keeping notes of your own, little sketches of personality. The butcher's mongrel, brave but suspicious. The seamstress's terrier, loyal yet vain. You don't write for publication, of course. These are just observations, your quiet rebellion against the scholars who debate emotion in lecture halls but never see it trotting beside them through rain. Sometimes, though, the theory turns dark. You hear of experiments, scientific men testing pain thresholds in animals, claiming it's for knowledge. It chills you, how curiosity can masquerade as cruelty. You whisper to your dogs, "Don't trust men who call you subject." They tilt their heads as if agreeing. But for every cold experimenter, there's a philosopher preaching empathy. One pamphlet you find declares that a man who walks a beast walks with his own reflection. You fold it into your coat pocket, a talisman for the next storm. That night, you walk your final route under moonlight. The city is quiet save for distant wheels on cobblestone. You think of all the minds arguing over the meaning of a bark or a wag, while here you simply feel it. The tug on the leash, the small heartbeat beside you, the silent trust that science can't quite measure. You glance at your reflection in a shop window. Tired eyes, muddy coat, 3 dogs looking up at you like disciples. You grin softly. Who studies whom now? The dogs wag their tails, and for a moment, you believe they know the answer. By the time October rolls around, the air grows heavier, the nights stretch longer, and the mood of London sharpens like a knife. You sense it on every corner: suspicion, hunger, the faint metallic tingle of fear. Walking dogs through this city feels less like a service and more like a patrol. Tonight, you've got 5 of them: a twitchy spaniel, a half-blind terrier, a lady's poodle with more jewelry than you, and 2 great hulking mastiffs on loan from a brewer in Wapping. The mastiffs move like loaded cannons, steady but dangerous if nudged. They're your insurance policy. Because lately, the streets have turned unpredictable. You hear it first as rumor in the coffee house: gangs stealing dogs to ransom them back to wealthy owners. Petnapping, one man calls it, a new term for an old sin. You laugh at first. Joke number 1. At least London thieves are branching into more respectable merchandise. But the humor doesn't last. Within a week, half the walkers you know have lost clients' pets to thieves. The pattern's clear enough. The stolen dogs are all valuable: greyhounds, spaniels, lapdogs with pedigrees longer than their tails. Notices appear in newspapers, offering rewards. Lost: a white Maltese responding to the name Venus. 10 guineas and no questions asked. The no questions part tells you everything. A mainstream historical fact: by the 1750s, organized pet theft had become a recognized problem in London. Dog thieves, called dognappers by the press, worked in teams, stealing fashionable dogs and demanding ransoms through middlemen. Some were even suspected of selling the dogs to laboratories or foreign buyers when negotiations failed. The city, ever inventive, had found yet another industry born of vice. You can't help but get tangled in it. One night, while walking Lord Pelham's greyhound along the Strand, 2 men step from an alley. One whistles, the other feigns friendliness. "Fine animal," says the first. "Mind if I?" He reaches for the leash. Before he finishes, your mastiff growls, a low, bone-deep vibration that could curdle milk. The men retreat into the dark, muttering. You don't stop walking until you reach the safety of lamplight. Historians still argue whether these thefts were primarily organized crime or simply opportunistic poverty. To you, it doesn't matter much. Hunger and greed wear the same face. You report the incident to your client the next morning. Lord Pelham, ever dramatic, insists on hiring polite guardsmen to accompany his dog on walks. You suggest that perhaps his own temper draws more enemies than the greyhound's beauty. He glares. Joke number 2 earns you no tip, but it's worth it. Soon, you begin carrying a stout walking stick. You never use it on the dogs, only as deterrent to human pests. Other walkers do the same. You all start watching out for one another, crossing paths intentionally, keeping eyes peeled for trouble. London may mock your trade, but it's learning to respect it too. After all, you now know the city's alleys and tempers better than most constables. One evening, you encounter a patrolman near Covent Garden. He's leaning against a post, yawning. "Evening," he says. "Quiet night?" You shrug. "Depends on the dogs. Depends on the thieves." He nods knowingly. "If you see any rascals, send word. The magistrate's offering coin for their heads." You arch an eyebrow. "And if I bring the dogs instead?" "Double the trouble," he replies with a grin. That's joke number 3, shared between men of weary professions. But beneath the humor lies something darker. You begin to notice that some walkers themselves have turned thief. Men who once strolled with leashes now trailing whispers instead. One vanishes altogether after a client's prized spaniel disappears. Another turns up in the debtor's prison. The trade is maturing, yes, but it's also devouring its own. Still, you keep walking. You can't afford not to. The dogs, innocent of all this scheming, still need their exercise, their air, their small patches of freedom. At dusk, you lead them along the Thames embankment. The fog swirls thick as broth. You hear the splash of oars, the creak of ropes, the faint cry of a night bird. It's beautiful in a lonely sort of way. You think of how the city's wealth attracts both worshippers and wolves. Pet walking, of all things, has become a mirror of that dynamic, half service, half peril. You remember the early days, when it was merely muddy boots and polite nods. Now it's caution and quick reflexes. You've even heard of walkers carrying bells or lanterns to ward off ambushes. London invents fear as fast as it invents fashion. Sometimes, though, the crime becomes farce. A butcher's assistant once tried to kidnap a duchess's pug, only to have it bite his thumb so viciously he ran to the nearest apothecary screaming. The duchess, upon hearing the story, doubled your pay for the bravery of your profession. You thank the pug personally with a slice of ham. Yet even amid the absurdity, a new role begins to form. Walkers aren't just caretakers anymore, they're watchdogs in their own right. You find yourself reporting suspicious figures, noting which alleys harbor thieves, even escorting nervous clients through rough districts. You laugh softly to yourself. Somehow, dog walkers have become London's accidental detectives. And maybe, you think, that's fitting. Who better to read the city's scents, its unseen trails, its hidden moods, than those who follow dogs daily? The fog thickens as you turn toward home. Your dogs pad close, their bodies warm against the chill. The city around you feels vast and watchful, every shadow a possible trickster, every echo a memory. You tap your walking stick in rhythm with your steps, steady as a heartbeat. You pass a corner where last week a dog was stolen. Tonight, it's quiet. Somewhere, a carriage rattles by, a candle flickering in its window. You smile faintly. London keeps its secrets, but you've learned to walk them on a leash. Morning again, and the sky wears its usual London color, somewhere between pewter and old porridge. You pull your coat tight, check the leashes, and set off toward Bond Street, where the city's most fashionable residents begin their daily performance. The dogs today are a pageant in themselves, a miniature spaniel trimmed like lace, a whippet sleek as a quill, and a new import from France, a toy poodle so powdered it sneezes glitter every third step. You can smell wealth here, starch, lavender, and a faint whiff of hypocrisy. Ladies glide past in gowns the color of sugared almonds. Their footmen trail behind carrying parasols and small furred accessories. You catch snippets of gossip, who wore what, who barked at whom, and whose dog was spotted in the wrong company. Welcome to the latest London obsession, pets as portable reputation. It's easy to laugh. Joke number one, some women marry for status, others just leash it. But the trend is real enough. You've seen ladies coordinate ribbons to match their dogs' collars, and men commission portraits of themselves with hounds posed like royalty. In Georgian society, a dog isn't just a companion, it's a symbol of taste, breeding, and occasionally absurdity. A mainstream historical fact: by the 1760s, fashionable pet keeping had exploded among London's upper classes. Breeders advertised pure lines in newspapers. Tailors sold miniature coats for lapdogs. Even perfumers marketed eau de canine, a cologne for those who wished their pets to smell as expensive as they looked. The line between affection and affectation had blurred into perfume mist. You lead your pack through the park and notice the onlookers, people watching people watch dogs. It's theater with paws. Every bow, Every leash flick, every good boy is part of the show. A duchess passes with her pug carried on a velvet pillow. A rival lady pretends not to stare, then promptly orders a larger pillow for her own. Status here is measured in inches of fluff. Historians still argue whether this obsession was a genuine love of animals or simply another extension of consumer culture. Some call it the dawn of sentimental pet keeping. Others see it as yet another way to flaunt money. You suspect it's both, with a dash of boredom stirred in. The poodle begins to sneeze again, scattering powder like holy ash. You sigh and wipe its nose. A passing gentleman chuckles. That thing's got more flour than a baker's apron. Aye, you reply, and costs twice as much per sneeze. Joke number 2 owns you a nod of respect. Around midday, you rest near the Serpentine. 2 walkers approach, Canning, your old friend, and Molly Cutts, now something of a celebrity herself. She's dressed sharply, with a scarlet ribbon that matches her terrier's collar. Fashion's gone mad, she says, sitting beside you. Lady Devonshire paid 6 guineas for a leash stitched with real silver thread. Imagine polishing that every morning. You shake your head. At least it won't tarnish faster than the lady's virtue. Canning bursts out laughing, joke number 3, and the dogs wag as if in agreement. But beneath the humor lies fascination. London's pet fashion industry is booming. Cobbler shops now offer tiny boots for dogs to protect against filth. Silversmiths craft engraved tags so owners can recover lost pets without speaking to common folk. Even portrait painters are cashing in, selling family scenes where the spaniel occupies center stage. You once deliver a dog to such a sitting. The artist, powdered wig askew, begs the animal to stay still. He'll not pose, you warn. He's got the patience of a tax collector. After 2 hours and a stolen sausage, the painting is done. The lady weeps with joy, declaring it a likeness most divine. You leave wondering whether she means herself or the dog. By evening, the park fills with watchers, people promenading not for exercise, but for admiration. You stroll with your charges, conscious of posture and poise. Somewhere along the way, you realize you've become part of the spectacle too. Walkers are judged as extensions of their clients, tidy, calm, and ideally invisible until needed. The irony isn't lost on you. Those who keep animals for vanity now depend on humans to maintain that vanity discreetly. Still, you play the game well. You learn to flatter, to notice the right compliments. The spaniel's coat gleams like satin today, you say to a client. Indeed, she purrs, we've been boiling eggs in donkey milk for the shine. You nod solemnly as if this were normal chemistry. It's not, but London rarely is. A French pamphlet claims that dog fur mixed with crushed pearls prevents wrinkles when applied to the face. You tell Molly this and she nearly chokes on her tea. So the dogs keep them young twice over, one alive, one ground up. You both laugh until the terriers bark in confusion. The days pass in a blur of satin and sarcasm. You find yourself reflecting on the odd equation of wealth, how comfort breeds eccentricity, and eccentricity breeds opportunity. Without vanity, you'd be unemployed. Without dogs, half the city's tailors and perfumers would starve. London's economy, you realize, runs as much on fur as on finance. As dusk settles, you escort the last of your canine aristocrats home. Inside one grand townhouse, servants line up with towels to wipe each paw before the dog crosses the marble floor. You catch a glimpse of the lady herself, cooing as if greeting a prince. Then she sees you in the doorway and nods curtly, acknowledging the invisible hands that keep her world immaculate. Outside, the street lamps flicker to life, halos trembling in the mist. You walk home lighter, not just in coin but in understanding. Somewhere between absurdity and admiration, your trade has become indispensable. You don't just walk dogs, you parade symbols, manage egos, and choreograph the daily ballet of London's self-image. And though you'll never own a powdered poodle or silver leash, you've got something rarer: perspective. You know that behind every jeweled collar lies a human craving for attention, for affection, for proof they are still seen. The dogs, bless them, don't care either way. They walk, they wag, they forgive. Perhaps that's why people adore them. They love us without needing to understand our foolishness. You smile as the wind carries the faint scent of perfume mixed with coal smoke. Tomorrow, you'll walk the same streets again, surrounded by lace, laughter, and the faint jingle of silver leashes, London's fashionable symphony of vanity on four legs. By now, you've walked enough dogs, dodged enough thieves, and bowed to enough powdered patrons to know that London's pulse isn't just heard, it's smelled, barked, and wagged. But lately, another kind of energy ripples through the city. It's the scent of curiosity, of change, of new machines clattering behind workshop doors. Somewhere, someone is always inventing something, and you, dear walker, are about to stumble into one of those curious corners of history. It begins on a Tuesday, the kind of damp, unremarkable day London breeds in batches. You're crossing Smithfield Market when a wiry man in soot-streaked goggles calls out from his stall. "Walker, care to make history?" You glance at his sign, Mr. Pemberton's patent canine perambulator. A dog stroller. A literal, wheeled contraption with room for one pampered spaniel and no shame whatsoever. The inventor beams. Ideal for the refined lady unwilling to soil her boots. The dog, you see, enjoys the motion. Builds confidence. You stare. "You mean it rides while we walk?" "Precisely," he says, triumphant. "The dog need not exert itself." Joke number 1. The perfect machine for lazy beasts, human or canine. Still, the idea catches on. Within months, wealthy clients demand perambulators for their pets. You're occasionally hired just to push one through Hyde Park, like a nursemaid to a creature too noble to touch the ground. You can't decide if this is progress or punishment. A mainstream historical fact: the 18th century saw an explosion of mechanical curiosities, clockwork toys, automata, even self-winding watches. It was the dawn of applied ingenuity, when engineers began applying human convenience to every corner of life, including animal care. The dog perambulator may not have been recorded by name, but carriages and baskets for transporting pets are documented by 1770. As you trundle a perfumed spaniel through drizzle, you pass a crowd gathered around another spectacle, a man demonstrating a mechanical leash. It's a real device, a spring coiled inside a brass cylinder. Adjustable range, he boasts. Retract or extend with a turn. You raise an eyebrow, a leash that walks itself. He grins. Or, at least, spares your arm. Historians still argue whether such devices were ever truly practical or merely the 18th century equivalent of Kickstarter vaporware. But you see the pattern: invention creeping into every aspect of leisure. Even dog walking isn't safe from innovation. Not that you mind. Some gadgets are genuinely useful. A silversmith in Clerkenwell offers anti-slip boots for dogs, soft leather pads with tiny nails embedded to grip the cobbles. You test a pair and watch in disbelief as your terrier struts over icy pavement without slipping. If only they'd fit landlords, you mutter. Joke number 2 lands squarely with the blacksmith polishing his shoes beside you. Soon, entrepreneurs begin treating dog walkers like couriers. A man named Waller opens a canine depot, where owners can hire walkers by appointment. You sign on occasionally for extra coin. The office keeps ledgers, routes, even time cards, turning a once chaotic street trade into proto-bureaucracy. Efficiency, Waller says proudly. You call it what it is, the domestication of dog walking. One evening, you attend a demonstration in Soho. The future of urban convenience, the pamphlet claims. Inside a smoky hall, inventors unveil gadgets to solve problems no one asked to solve. A rain hood for hounds made of oiled silk. A voice horn for calling dogs over long distances. It looks suspiciously like a megaphone. And, of course, a prototype leash with a built-in umbrella. The crowd applauds politely. You whisper to the walker beside you, "Next they'll invent a machine that walks us." He grins. Don't give them ideas. Joke number 3, your nightly quota achieved. The spirit of innovation does have its charm, though. For the first time, your profession seems almost modern. You see printed ads offering dog management services, complete with testimonials. One reads, "My pug no longer sulks. My thanks to Mr. H, whose methods are humane and ingenious." You squint at the fine print and realize it's a friend of yours under pseudonym. Clever devil. Even the city itself joins in. The newly formed Society for the Improvement of Domestic Creatures proposes standardized leash lengths and better sanitation near parks. A committee even debates whether dog waste should be collected to avoid public offense. The proposal dies quickly. No one volunteers for the job, but it plants a seed of modern civic thinking. One speaker earnestly suggested fitting dogs with miniature lanterns, so they could be seen in the fog. The idea gets laughed down, yet you can't help picturing a parade of glowing pugs bobbing through London mist like spectral marsh lights. Through all this, your reputation grows. Clients now praise you not just as a walker but as a man versed in the mechanical conveniences of canine care. You even get invited to a salon where philosophers discuss whether machines might one day mimic living creatures. "Imagine," says one, "a mechanical dog with the loyalty of metal and none of the mess." You reply softly, "Imagine one that still loves you." The room goes quiet. Progress always pauses at the edge of sentiment. The next day, you see a child dragging a wooden dog on wheels, a toy that barks when pulled thanks to hidden gears. It's charming, ridiculous, and oddly touching. You realize that, just like that toy, London itself is wound by invisible springs, commerce, curiosity, and the endless motion of human ambition. And in the middle of it all, you keep walking. Machines may rise, gadgets may glitter, but dogs still need the rhythm of real footsteps, the smell of rain, and a hand steady on the leash. As dusk folds around you, the city hums with invention. A carriage rattles past, its lamps flickering like stars trapped in glass. Somewhere in a workshop, a new device is being sketched by candlelight. And you, walking through fog and sawdust, can't help smiling. For all its madness, London is alive, and so are you. You wake before dawn to the rhythmic drip of rain leaking through the cracked eaves of your room. The city outside is a muffled symphony, hooves clattering distantly, the hiss of wet wheels, a few brave vendors calling their wares through the drizzle. You tie your boots, grab the leashes, and breathe the sharp tang of October air. Another day, another dozen dogs, another adventure in London's endless experiment with civilization. But something has shifted. The inventions you laughed at have settled into routine. The city's obsession with dogs has evolved into something broader, a sense that animals, for the first time, have public importance. The newspapers carry letters debating the rights of beasts. Coffee houses host arguments over whether dogs can reason. Sermons mention compassion toward all living souls. You, the humble walker, find yourself at the intersection of sentiment and philosophy, just trying to keep your charges from rolling in puddles. A mainstream historical fact: by the late 18th century, London began to see early animal welfare movements. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Brutes, a small precursor to the later RSPCA, was discussed in pamphlets as early as the 1770s. Thinkers influenced by Enlightenment humanism argued that kindness to animals reflected moral progress in man. You feel that shift most keenly one foggy morning near St. James's Park. A crowd gathers around a man beating his cart horse. The scene curdles your stomach, and before you think, you shout, "Enough!" The man sneers. "Mind your dogs, Walker." The crowd murmurs but doesn't move. Your mastiff growls, deep and deliberate. The whip lowers. For the first time, you see strangers step forward, muttering agreement. Compassion, it seems, has become fashionable. Later that day, a lady client praises your courage. "I read of such incidents in The Spectator," she says. "London is improving." You bow politely, though privately you think improvement should require less applause. Still, you can't help feeling the current of something new, a moral tide rising through the cobbles. You're invited to attend a society for the better treatment of creatures meeting above a Fleet Street tavern. You go out of curiosity and perhaps for the promise of free ale. Inside, philosophers, parsons, and shopkeepers sit shoulder to shoulder, debating laws to curb cruelty. One man reads aloud a petition proposing fines for overworking dogs in delivery carts. Another argues that beasts feel pain but not injustice, therefore pity should be personal, not legal. Historians still argue whether such societies truly influenced policy or merely soothed guilty consciences. But sitting there, surrounded by candle smoke and conviction, you sense something genuine stirring. Joke number 1 arises naturally. A burly butcher interrupts, complaining that pampered pets get more sympathy than apprentices. You lean over and whisper, "Perhaps you should wag your tail more often." He glares, then laughs, and the tension breaks. In the weeks that follow, your work changes in small ways. Clients ask whether their dogs seem happy. Gentlemen inquire if longer walks improve their animals' spirits. You become, accidentally, a sort of moral consultant. You tell one owner that kindness is cheaper than medicine. She doubles your pay. Enlightenment, it turns out, is profitable. Meanwhile, the streets hum with protest songs and pamphlets, not just about animals but about people, slavery, debtors' rights, the cost of bread. Everything feels connected, as if the city itself is learning empathy one cause at a time. You see parallels everywhere. The chained dogs behind butcher stalls remind you of men chained in prisons for pennies of debt. The more London humanizes animals, the more it questions its treatment of humans. A radical pamphlet you find at the print market claims that dogs shall one day walk their masters. The author insists that compassion will so transform society that beasts will lead humans morally. You read it aloud to Molly Cutts, who smirks. "Then I'd best teach my terrier to handle rent money." Joke number 2 floats over tankards of ale. One cold afternoon, you pass a preacher at Speaker's Corner proclaiming, "Cruelty begins with small hearts and small dogs." You nearly choke trying not to laugh. He spots you and waves the Bible. "You there, do your beasts know mercy?" You smile. "Better than most bishops, sir." The crowd erupts. Joke number 3, unplanned but perfect. Still, you reflect on the preacher's words later. Do the dogs know mercy? You think they might. You've seen them nuzzle the wounded, guard the lost, forgive blows, and return again with wagging tails. Their goodness feels uncomplicated in a way that humbles you. The next morning, a client's elderly retriever collapses mid-walk. You kneel in the mud, heart thudding, and cradle its head. Passers-by stop, not to scoff, but to help. Someone fetches water, another offers cloth. In that moment, the city feels gentle. You whisper to the dying dog until its breathing slows, until stillness takes it. When you carry it home, Even strangers step aside with quiet respect. That evening, as you sit by your fire, you think about how far you've come, from muddy alleys and stolen mutts to this, a profession tangled up with the city's conscience. You used to walk for coin, now you walk for something less definable, more sacred. Later, you hear of a magistrate who fined a coachman for whipping his horse too harshly, the first such ruling you can recall. It's a small victory, but it feels monumental. London, once all grit and indifference, is learning to feel. You walk through the fog that night with your remaining dogs, quiet, steady, uncomplaining companions. Each paw step seems to echo that larger awakening, the heartbeat of compassion stitched through cobblestone. You whisper softly, "Good city, we're getting there." The dogs look up, as if agreeing. And as you guide them home, lamplight glimmering on wet streets, you realize that perhaps walking dogs has never really been about animals at all. It's about the humans they teach to be better. By the winter of 1790, London feels like a living paradox, filthy and enlightened, cruel and compassionate, cynical yet softening at the edges. The dogs, of course, remain unbothered. They pad through frost and fog with steady purpose, reminding you that survival, not philosophy, keeps the city alive. But change hums beneath the cobbles like a restless current. You feel it even as your boots crunch through ice near Covent Garden, a strange mixture of progress and nostalgia, as if London isn't sure what kind of creature it wants to be. You've become something of a neighborhood fixture now, the philosopher of the leash. Someone once called you in jest. You laughed, but the name stuck. The children shout it when they see you. Strangers nod in greeting. Even constables treat you with a kind of gruff respect. Not bad for someone who started as a mud-splattered errand boy chasing strays through alleys. One crisp morning, you find yourself in Hyde Park, where the frost sparkles like powdered sugar across the lawns. Dozens of walkers and their dogs stroll by, each pairing its own little ecosystem of affection and absurdity. There's Lady Rotham's new Italian greyhound wearing a wool coat finer than your best shirt, a sailor's terrier trotting proudly in a sailor cap, and, most impressive, an enormous Newfoundland hauling a child's sled across the path. It strikes you that your trade has evolved into a reflection of London itself. Diverse, eccentric, resilient. You remember when dog walking was a novelty. Now it's an institution, a fixture of urban life. Newspapers even print classified ads for gentlemen walkers of beasts, and young apprentices seek you out for lessons. A mainstream historical fact: by the late 18th century, London's parks, especially Hyde Park and St. James's, had become established sites for leisure walking, both for people and their dogs. The idea of exercise for health was gaining popularity, influenced by medical writers like James Hart and George Cheney, who claimed movement and fresh air cured melancholy. Dog walking fit right in, blurring the lines between recreation, therapy, and spectacle. You notice this change in your clients too. The aristocrats still want their animals seen, but now they speak of keeping them well. Doctors prescribe fresh air for dogs and humans alike. The fashionable fear of indoor humors has spawned an outdoor renaissance, and you, unwittingly, are its guide. One afternoon, a physician client invites you to his study. He's been researching the therapeutic effects of animal companionship. You expect more pseudoscientific chatter, but his tone is earnest. "I believe," he says, "that a man's mind is steadied by the loyalty of a dog." You grin. Then London's full of potential saints. Joke number one lands gently. He laughs, scribbles something in his notebook, and thanks you for the inspiration. You realize, not without pride, that your daily work, mud, fur, chaos and all, has become a subject of scientific interest. Walkers like you are no longer dismissed as servants. You're participants in the city's grand experiment in empathy. Historians still argue whether this new appreciation of animals was driven by genuine compassion or by boredom with excess. But you suspect London, for once, might be capable of sincerity. On your routes, you start noticing small miracles. Shopkeepers leave bowls of water near doorways. Children feed biscuits to passing dogs. Even beggars, who once snarled at beasts competing for scraps, now share crumbs without complaint. It's not universal goodness, just flickers of decency, but they shine brighter against the grime. Someone claims the royal family's dogs receive individual Christmas gifts, tiny puddings wrapped in silk. You chuckle with your fellow walkers. "When I die," says Molly Cutts, "bury me next to a royal spaniel. Better odds of a monument." Joke number 2 earns a round of laughter so loud it startles the terriers. But not all is cheer. The city still harbors its cruelties. You pass cockfighting pits, bear baiting yards, and ragged men selling stray pups to laboratories. You intervene when you can, though you've learned not to play hero every time. Some fights you win, others you survive. Yet you can't shake the sense that the city is teetering between eras, one foot in the muck, one toe in morality. Then one evening, the impossible happens. You're approached by a clerk from the office of a member of parliament. He says a bill is being drafted, something about regulating cruelty to animals, and they need testimony from working men of experience. You nearly laugh in disbelief. You want a dog walker's opinion in Parliament. "Aye," says the clerk, "you've seen what others only their eyes." You attend the meeting in a borrowed coat, surrounded by powdered wigs and polished phrases. You speak plainly, about loyalty, exhaustion, kindness, and fear. About dogs who trust their walkers more than their owners. About cruelty disguised as indifference. When you finish, the room is silent. Then someone claps softly. You've no idea whether it changes the law, but it changes you. Joke number 3 arrives later, told to Molly over ale. Imagine that, me advising Parliament. Next, they'll want the dogs to vote. She grins. Couldn't do worse than the current lot. As months pass, you sense your own era closing. The young walkers coming up behind you talk of wages, schedules, uniforms. They speak of organizing, a guild, even. You smile at their ambition. Every trade matures eventually. You once walked stray mutts through alleys. Now your successors will negotiate contracts for spaniels. Progress, you suppose, always wears odd shoes. Winter deepens. The Thames freezes briefly, hosting a frost fair with stalls and music on the ice. You take a pack of dogs across the frozen river one morning, their paws crunching softly. Vendors sell roasted chestnuts, jugglers perform, and a fiddler plays God Save the King to the rhythm of skittering paws. The dogs bound and bark in delight, their breath misting like small clouds. For a moment, standing there amid laughter and frost, you realize how extraordinary your life has been. You've witnessed London reinvent itself, from grime to gentility, from cruelty to compassion, from chaos to curiosity, all through the eyes of creatures who never asked for more than a walk and a warm voice. And though the city will change again, though factories will rise and new generations will forget your name, the rhythm you set, the quiet bond between walker and dog, will remain. Because no machine, no law, no progress can replace that simplest of exchanges. Trust on a leash, step by steady step through fog and time. You wake one last time to the muted heartbeat of London, a city that has grown older, wiser, and somehow gentler while pretending it hasn't. The fog outside your window glows faintly, turned silver by the morning lamps. Your joints ache in familiar ways, your boots are more patch than leather, but the leashes still hang by the door like old friends waiting for one final adventure. You step outside and breathe deep. The air smells of wet earth, chimney smoke, and distant bread. It's been 30 years since your first walk through these streets, and though the city has transformed, new bridges, gas lamps, fancy promenades, you still recognize its rhythm. The Thames still murmurs its secrets. The dogs still tug at their leashes with the same hopeful impatience. Today's pack is smaller, 2 elderly spaniels and a mutt with the soul of a philosopher. They are slower now, and so are you, but the pace feels right. Together you cross Westminster Bridge, the water below glinting faintly in the half-light. The city hums around you, carriages rattling, vendors calling, the distant toll of St. Paul's like a heartbeat echoing through fog. You think back to how it began, the muddy alleys, the mockery of strangers, the nights you questioned whether walking dogs was a life or a detour. Yet here you are, still walking, still needed. London once thought of your trade as lowly, now it's respectable, even genteel. A generation ago, your kind were street servants. Today, you're professionals with clientele, uniforms, and pride. Funny how persistence sometimes outpaces prestige. A mainstream historical fact. By the end of the 18th century, professional dog walking in London was well established enough to be mentioned in newspapers and city records. Pet ownership had become a marker of refinement, and paid handlers were a recognized part of urban service life. What began as convenience evolved into career. You pass familiar faces along the route, apprentices who now lead their own packs, ladies who still wave from carriage windows, Molly Cuts who shouts from across the park, "You're late again, philosopher." You grin and wave your walking stick in mock salute. Wisdom takes its time. Joke number 1 rolls away on the wind. There's pride in your chest, yes, but also something softer, a quiet satisfaction that you've walked through history without realizing you were part of it. You think of all the small changes that grew from your trade. Laws whispered into existence, habits reformed, kindnesses that became contagious. Dog walkers, once invisible, helped civilize a city by accident. Historians still argue whether 18th century London truly had professional dog walkers as we imagine them today, or if the trade was simply one branch of domestic service. Grooms, footmen, errand boys. You smile at that. Let them argue. You've lived the proof beneath your boots. The dogs pause near the Serpentine, sniffing the grass where spring will soon return. You sit on a bench and watch the city breathe. You remember the inventions, the perambulators, the mechanical leashes, the absurd collars of silver, and how they all seemed revolutionary once. Yet none of them replaced the simple act of walking side by side. Technology can mimic motion, but not affection. A proposal for public dog gardens, spaces dedicated to exercise without fear of theft or fines. You grin. Soon they'll have membership cards and refreshment stalls, you mutter. The philosopher mutt beside you tilts his head as if to say, would that be so bad? Joke number 2. Gentle, wistful, earned. You rise and stroll once more through Hyde Park, each step echoing with memory. There's the path where you dodged thieves, the bench where you first met Molly, the lamppost you swore contained ghosts of every lost mutt you ever found. London is full of such ghosts, some human, some canine, all woven into its restless soul. As afternoon fades, a drizzle begins, soft as sighs. You pull your collar up, feel the cold damp seep into your sleeves, and realize how deeply you love this stubborn city. Its noise, its filth, its grace, all of it. Because beneath the grime and grandeur, London has a beating heart, and for decades, you've matched your stride to it. A boy runs past with a puppy in his arms, laughing as it licks his chin. You watch them disappear down the path and feel an odd tug behind your ribs. That, you think, is the future, the next pair to walk these streets, the next generation to learn patience from paws. You hope the city stays kind to them. Joke number 3 arrives quietly, muttered to the dogs. If reincarnation's real, I'd like to come back as one of you. better meals, shorter shifts. The spaniel snorts, you swear it's laughter. You head home slowly, rain thickening into mist. At the door, you hang the leashes where they've always lived, the leather worn smooth as parchment. The dogs curl by the hearth, sighing in contentment. You pour a small measure of ale, raise it toward the firelight, and whisper, to the walkers, past, present, and yet to come. Outside, the bells toll softly. The city moves on, unaware that one of its quiet architects is hanging up his boots. But that's fine. Your legacy isn't in stone or ink, it's in footsteps, paw prints, and the invisible bond between motion and mercy. You lean back, eyes heavy, the fire a warm blur. The last sound you hear before sleep claims you is the soft, rhythmic breathing of the dogs, steady, peaceful, eternal. As the embers fade and the story drifts to its close, imagine yourself in that quiet London room. The air is thick with the scent of rain and old wood. The fire hums low, and outside, the city whispers itself to sleep. You feel the warmth of a blanket around your shoulders, the soft tap of rain against glass, the calm weight of history resting beside you. Think of the thousands of steps walked across those cobblestones, boots and paws, hopes and habits, each one shaping a world more patient than the day before. In every age, there are walkers, people who choose care over speed, attention over indifference. They might not make headlines, but they keep the world gentle. Breathe deeply now. Picture the dogs settling, tails curling, eyes drooping in trust. The city's noises fade to murmurs. The fog becomes a lullaby. The fire sighs its last golden breath. You've journeyed through centuries tonight, from filthy alleys to polished promenades, from chaos to quiet understanding. And all the while, the leash between humanity and its better nature has held firm. You can let it go now, just for the night. Close your eyes. The streets are empty, the lamps are soft, and London, ever restless, ever alive, finally exhales. You walk one last time through the dream of history, steady and unhurried, until even the echoes fade. Sweet dreams.